Hi everyone, it's Kathy. Thank you so much for joining me. I am super excited to be a part of the 7 Kids Crafts Summer Lovin' video hop. And today I'll be featuring a new stamp set called Make Waves by 7 Kids Crafts. There's going to be a giveaway and I'll talk about that a little bit later on, as well as give you more information about this video hop. But to get started, I stamped these super cute mermaids onto a piece of Cougar super smooth cardstock using Catherine Pooler Midnight ink. Both the cardstock and the ink are Copic friendly or alcohol marker friendly, and I'll be using my Copics today. Now, in the interest of time, because I will be sharing 2 cards, I will only be showing how I colored one of the mermaids, and then the little fish, I'm actually going to show you how I colored him towards the end of the video. Anyway, moving right along, for this mermaid, I started out by coloring her skin, and I tend to use more fair skin toned markers. And after I was done, I kind of wished I would have gone just a little bit darker for her, but in the end, I was pretty happy with it. I did my normal technique of coloring and started with my darkest and worked my way out to the lightest color. And as far as a light source goes, I really wasn't paying too much attention to that. I was focusing more on where shadows would naturally occur. After I was done coloring in her skin, I moved on to her little bikini top, and for whatever reason, I thought it was necessary to use 3 markers, but really, I could have gotten away with just using 2 since it was such a small area. For her tail, I really wanted to do like a bright corally orange color. So I started with R05 and did that just along that right hand side. And then I added a little bit of the R05 over the scales that are drawn into her tail. Next, I moved on to R22 and blended out the R05 a little bit. Then I came in with YR65 and started to blend that out. And when I was done with that and brought in the YR02, I realized that I should have used the YR02 first. So I blended that and still left that little bit of a white space just so I could have a highlight. And then I filled that in with the YR65. For the fins on her tail, I used a couple of different purple colors, and I added the darkest at the top of the fins and flicked down, and then from the bottom of her fins, and I flicked up. Then I filled in with my other 2 colors, maintaining a highlight in the center of the fins at the bottom of her tail. I'll be sure to have all of the products that I used, as well as all of the Copic colors that I used, listed in the description box below. This hop is a hashtag driven hop. All you need to do to follow along is click on the hashtag located in the title of my video or in the description box below, and it'll pull up all of the videos the other creators have prepared for this hop. There is going to be a giveaway, and the giveaway is the Make Waves stamp set, which is the stamp set that I am using. The giveaway is open to US residents only. To be entered into the giveaway, please leave a comment on this video and please indicate that you are from the US. Make sure you leave your comment by June 13th at the very latest. The winner will be announced on June 17th over on Marla's channel, which is Mad About Cards and Crafts, and you will have 1 week to claim your prize. I'll be sure to have a link to Marla's channel, as well as the 7 Kids Crafts online store, as well as her Facebook group. She does do live videos in her Facebook group quite often, and they're pretty fun to watch, so I encourage you to check that out as well. Back to the coloring really quick. I did use a green marker for her eyes, and then to add a little bit more texture to her tail and the fins at the bottom of her tail, I just did a little bit of stippling, and I concentrated the stippling on the red part, more so on the right hand side, and then for the fins, I concentrated the stippling at the very top where they meet the end of her tail and went down towards the very end of her fins. For the octopus, I used the same purple colors that I did for the mermaid's little bikini top and the fins at the bottom of her tail. And again, I started with my darkest and worked my way out to the lightest. And I made sure to maintain a highlight in the center of that little guy's face. And then to add some texture to the octopus, I used a V09 marker and just did tiny little dots, just add a little bit of texture. For the starfish, it was very easy coloring. I just did a couple of colors and literally did just lines until it was completely filled in. After I had all of the coloring done, I did set that aside, and then I started to work on my background panel. I started with a piece of Neenah Classic Crest cardstock, and it's cut to 3.5 by 8.5. I am going to run it through my die cut machine with a stitched rectangle die, but I do like to start with a piece that's a little bit larger than what I need for when I'm doing some ink blending. For the ink blending, I used Catherine Pooler inks in Something Borrowed, Aquatini, and Mint to Be. And I just did a quick layer of color over that panel. I wasn't trying to get it perfectly blended because I'm going to be adding a stencil on top of that. The stencil is from a Colorful Life Designs, and it's a 6x9 stencil. I'm really excited about the 6x9 stencils because they're perfect for slimline cards. Anyway, I used painter's tape to hold that stencil in place, and then I used the same colors as I did and just did another layer of color over the top of that. After I was done with that, I thought I needed to have some splatter, and I also wanted to have some shimmer, so I brought out my Perfect Pearls and added a little bit to my craft mat and sprayed it with water. So I splattered with some ink, and then I mixed the ink with the Perfect Pearls and the water, and I splattered that. And then I sprayed a tiny little bit of clean water just so I could have some clean bubbles on my background. Once I was done with the stenciling, I set that aside and decided that I wanted to have a little sand bank at the bottom for the mermaid who's sitting down to sit on. I didn't want her to just look like she was weirdly floating in the water. So I grabbed another piece of Neenah Classic Crest cardstock, and I used my Antique Linen Distress Oxide ink and just did very quick ink blending with a mini ink blending tool. Then I grabbed a small makeup brush and my Vintage Photo Oxide ink and just dabbed it so it would look like there were grains of sand on the bottom. Then I went over that again with my mini ink blending tool just to blend that out. I just freehand cut little waves for the sandy bank with my scissors, and I set that aside. I did stamp the sentiment using my MISTI directly on the front of my stenciled panel, and then it was time to put my card together. I used my tape runner to adhere the sandy bank to the front, and then I used my tape runner to adhere the stenciled panel to a piece of black cardstock that I cut just slightly larger. And then I adhered that to the front of a side folding note card. My side folding card started out measuring 8.5 by 7, and then I folded it along the 7-inch side, so the finished card size is 3.5 by 8.5. I did fussy cut all of the images out, and I added foam tape to all of them. I placed them on the front of my card, but I didn't press them down until I was happy with the placement. And then I noticed that there was a piece of dog hair stuck to my fish, so I had to pull him up and get rid of the dog hair. And for final touches, I added some little bubbles from Trinity Stamps using some liquid glue, and that finishes up my first card. So for my second card, I still had the ink left on my stencil, and I thought that I could use that to start out my second card. So I sprayed the stencil with some water and lifted it up and just flipped it over and placed it right onto a piece of 80-pound Neenah Classic Crest cardstock. And that piece is cut down to 4.25 by 5.5. Again, I'll be cutting that piece down a little bit with a stitched rectangle die a little bit later. I set that piece aside and started to work on the inside scene of my shaker card. I grabbed my Peekaboo circle die and I did trace around it just so I would know where to do the ink blending and the stamping. And again, I used the Catherine Pooler Midnight ink for the stamping. And the seaweed, I really just kind of eyeballed it. I wasn't too worried if they overlapped or didn't overlap. I just wanted to have seaweed on the bottom there. Then I grabbed a stencil from My Favorite Things and my Antique Linen Oxide ink so that I could have a sandy bottom. Cleaned off this stencil and then flipped it around so that I could ink blend the same blue inks that I used on my first card, just to have that watery look there. And before I did that ink blending, I did create a mask for the little fish because I wasn't sure how the Copic markers would work coloring over the Catherine Pooler inks. When I removed the mask from the little fish, there was a little bit of a white halo underneath because I didn't have the mask perfectly placed. So I just filled that in with BG10 and BG11. Then I just continued to color in my little fish, and I used the same colors for the fish on my first card, which I'll have all of that listed down in the description below. Started with my darkest color and worked my way out to the lightest, again concentrating on where shadows would be more than a light source. For the seaweed, I did nothing fancy at all. I literally drew lines in each one of the little leaves for the seaweed with one color, and then I did use 2 other greens, but it was just a matter of filling in those leaves, and it was simple. So I finished the coloring, and then I ran the reverse stenciled panel through my Gemini Junior with the scalloped peekaboo die. I used my tape runner to adhere a piece of acetate on the back side of that. Next, I used some foam sticky strips to go around the window for my shaker card. I really like these foam sticky strips because they're really maneuverable, but it's easier to do it if you remove the release paper. So after I had all of my foam tape in place, I sprinkled in some itty bitty clear sequins, and then I used another piece of acetate to go on top of that so I can flip that top panel over and put it on top of my inside shaker scene piece of cardstock without having to guess where it needs to go, and also I didn't have to worry about losing any sequins. I used the same sticky strips and put them all the way around the shaker piece, and then I added some regular Scotch foam tape underneath the shaker window just so it wouldn't cave in when I placed it on top of my fish panel background piece. But I did notice that the sticky foam strips are a little bit thicker than my regular Scotch foam tape, so I did double that up. And I just plopped that on top of the inside scene, and then I used my tape runner to adhere that to the front of a top folding A2 size note card. And that is it. That is my second card. Don't forget to click on that hashtag so you can check out everybody else's video. I appreciate you stopping by today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, I'd love it if you would. And don't forget to ring the bell so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.